Okay, let's continue to discuss this paper. 30 years of change, the evolution of classified board. This paper was published in Journal of Finance, the top tier finance journal, last year. But I checked the publication release date, the first being seen in public is like 2022. So this paper was accepted for official publication after 3 years. So I think during these 3 years, the paper has revised many times, depending on the referee comments or depending on different journals' revision requirement. But this is a huge work to do this paper. Before get into the paper, let's understand what is staggered board. So staggered board means if a board directors, a board have 12 members, and there may have different kind or different class of the board. Class 1 may start from 2020, and class 2 is another term from 2021, and another class 3 is start from 2022. So you can imagine that 2023 class 1 will be replaced, but only 3/12, so it's a small portion. In 2024, class 2 will be replaced, right? But it's 50% of the board directors. And class 3 will be replaced 2025. So it's the same size, about 3/12. So this is a stagger board means. And using this kind of strategy, like an institutional investor activism, if they want to take over this board, this firm, it will be very difficult because each year they can only influence a small portion of the board director. So the voting will not be easy to take over in 1 year. So any election day, only one class of members is up to election. So they have 3 years, different terms. So this is, we call the stagger board. It's like the paper saying classify a board. So it's put it in here, is a horizontal, you can see that the length is different. Even though we are sitting here at the same time, but our turns are different. So depending on your class 1, 2, or 3. So this paper is very difficult because it actually spent a lot of time to categorize this board is classified or not. You have to, using the text, using machine learning skill to extract the word that their financial statement, including like 1, 2, or 3, or like 3 years, a lot of phrases and a lot of terms. The papers say they have 2,500 phrases to catch whether the firm is classified or not. It's a huge work. You have to input all the financial statements and to see whether they have shown these terms and doing the prediction power of your model and training your model in the first beginning and to match the real reality. If the prediction power is good, that means your training model can be applied to the other financial statement. So this is a very huge work for the authors to do. And this is quite interesting because I also check the reality in practice, and I find that sometimes they have something correct. Like the paper always say that in the first beginning, young firm and the mature firm, they have a different strategy. They have to protect the firms in the first beginning when they are young. But when they get in mature, the protection is not necessary entrenchment from the management maybe happened. But in reality, there is a block. So this question I need you to answer. What could Fuse classified board mean? I mean, maybe very unitary, declassify. If this is declassified, what will be the result? Declassify. If a few classified board could mean what? Can you guys answer this? If you read the paper, you might have multiple choice. But from your instance, there may have the other answers. All can be picked in this pool. Few declassify means very intended or very inclined to declassify. It's a multiple choice. You can pick a few answers. You can pick 2 or more answers. But think about it deeply. Maybe you may have different idea on this. I need at least one person answering the possible direction. We have 10. We have another 2 persons. Okay, interesting. I don't understand why diversity will be your highest rank. This is a few classified. It's not staggered, very unitary. If directors will be diverse, that probably will be more staggered, I imagine. Okay, so your answer is D, priority first, and take over from the papers. Okay, so you can prevent. So if you go to the unitary board, might have takeover risk. Okay, and then answer B. This is what I mean in reality. So if a outsider or institutional investor would like to replace the whole board, it would prefer to use declassified board because higher director turnover removed and replaced the members entirely in 1 year. So I can take over the firms instantly in 1 given year. So this is the realities usually seen behind. Okay, so here is the source. I read a blog, and it say, few classified board could mean higher director turnover. Okay, in reality, they are not just takeover. In takeover is like a 90s. It's not like a 2020s. It's maybe 10 or 2 decades ago. And the data, this data have this conclusion is from the information including 140,000 directors, and each one have background, leadership experiences, and so on. So they have a very good network data to replace and to display these results. Okay, so you can take a look at the results of another research results in practice. So in that paper, not this paper, in reality, they're using S&P 500 and the Russell 3000, the same results. You can see like in these 5 years, and this light blue is declassified, right? So declassified board is increasing over time. The same thing happened, Russell 3000. In these 5 years, we can see that it's a dark blue. Dark blue is declassified. Declassified board is increasing over time in these 5 years too. So even though they're using different data, but the results are very similar and very converged. And firm maintains staggered board for several reasons, including strategy and structural reasons, even in a high growth or mature. So for example, protection their R&D and against a hostile takeover, and also concern about the collection action cost, and using staggered board can maintain the stability, or otherwise some strategy have to have the continuity, right? And in 1 year, it replace in total. So we cannot continue the original plan or strategy. So if we want to maintain the stability and the commitment, staggered boards is necessary in some way. Even the firms is getting mature and in high growth, but it could happen, it still could happen based on this reason. So advantage of declassified board. By contrast, there have some advantage. For example, in declassified board, you can see the greater director accountability and the board refreshment very quick. In 1 year, a new input into the director's board very quick. New persons, new expertise, new experiences, and new energy, and young guys maybe very refreshed and more responsible governance. If you are underperform, you will be replaced very quick every year. They vote once. And less managerial entrenchment and weaker takeover barrier and stronger shareholders' voice. So this could be another advantage, but on the other side, it could be another disadvantage. So one thing could happen like this, the classified board may be more efficient and more transparent and greater directors' accountability and can refresh the board directors very quick and very responsible and can protect the takeover. So this is the advantage of the declassified board relative to classified board. If you understand this idea, then we can get into another stage, which is database. You can see a lot of database. This paper has employee. You can imagine that not just a database and a large size sample. 30 years using CRISP, compute state, and institutional investor 13F. And also you have to using the classified board status. So ISS also using index and non-index. So S&P 100, 1,500 from these 30 years to check, okay, small cap, medium cap, and large size. So take over defense data from ISS and IRRC and so on. So after this standardized database, they also using the machine learning algorithm to train their model by inputting the SEC filing from the SEC Edgar system. So you cannot imagine that the one financial statement just a thing, very small words. You have to let the model read all this statement to extract those keywords. Okay, so this is the data and the sample. So let's take a look at how difficult it may work. This is just the 25 top phrases to training the model and have the highest prediction power in determining the firm's classification. Is it staggered or not staggered? This is only catch the 25, but in total there have 2,000 more phrases. So if the financial statement, including like 3 years, 3 class, divided 3, and term or expiration and year, and this all 1, 2, 3, class 1, 2, 3, and one class, class 1, and director 3, and so on. If your financial statement appear to have this word or phrases, you will be category 2 staggered. Or otherwise, if you did not mention, then in that year, you will be non-staggered. So if you mention this word in that years for the financial statement, then you will see that there have a categorical being shown. So this is the authors showing how difficult the machine learning models read the financial statement, SEC Edgar. And this is one statement, for example, very lengthy, but the first paragraph, if there is something important, you have to disclose, right? So here is a sentence. The board of directors currently consists of 8 members serving staggered 3-year time. So you can catch 3-year term because the very high prediction power, 3 years, right? So this could be the sticker. So for example, the data was collected like this way. So it can collect like the private small size, medium size, large size firms over 100,000 observations. Or otherwise, if you only use like ISS compute state, you will not be able to collect so many because compute state only collect public firms listed in Dow Jones, AMEX, or S&P 500. So it's not the standards. You can use SEC Edgar for all private firms, small size firms. So your conclusion is not for those standardized data. It also including the other size of data. So methodology is not so simple beyond the big names. So very massive and inclusion. Large cap, small cap, medium cap, IPO firm, all included. Very inclusive. And AI-driven insight. Here is they're using financial statement training the machine learning model. So they scan the decades of financial statement, 10 case, 8 case, and to separate into different board director structures. And also the result seems very clean because the authors say they are using validity tests to see that very little trivial error. So it's probably much more accurate. So when the board is classified or declassified. And also this very longitudinal depth. So over 30 years, so including IPO cohort. So H0, H1, you can also have data. Usually we will not have those data because we're usually using the most recent data. But the IPO data here in this paper was collected. Because they have a different decade story. For example, 90s is anti-takeover story. For the 2010, it's like a shareholders activism story. So different decades have different story, and you cover 3 decades. So you can test whether anti-takeover or shareholder activism or your most recent, like AI-driven, very complicated, competitive industry, you can have different results. So using the life cycle of the firm's story. So we can learn something from the different result because of prior studies suggest that classified board were dead, no longer exists, but because they only check the S&P 500, so they have classified boards were dead, the conclusion. But this paper actually find another new evidence which showing that actually classified board flourish in the border market. If we take a look at the samples outside S&P 1,500, we will see those samples exist still. So this is what you say that is very complicated about the graphing, but I only focus on one because the story closer to us in this era, this decade, these years were quite important. It's like a time decay, or we should discount. So prior age will have different story, but the present value now, is much more important compared to the prior years. So here we can see, no matter control, whether you control sector fixed effect or control firm fixed effect, we can see the gray line is the most recent decade, right? The gray line here, most decade, the gray line most decade. Same pattern. Older age means horizontal to the right. Older age firm are less likely to adopt classified board over time. right? Older age, are less likely to adapt, classify over time, no matter you are in this decade or last decade or the previous decade. It's actually it's like a descending trend in general. Only one exception is the red line is upward, but it control for the others, too many. But usually you can see that the grid line is like a descending, right? So when ferns getting mature, they are most likely not to adapt because it's descending classified board. This is a trend. So if we take a look at the IPO sample, it's the same trend, you know, it's the same trend. We can see like the circle here is like a descending. So not just the mature firm, actually IPO sample have the same trend over years. So older firms are actually less likely to adapt the classified board close the mature form or IPO sample. So the same thing happened. This is like a R&D expenditure. So older age is R&D. Older firms spend less R&D expenditure. So it's the same direction as the paper address. And the same thing, intangible assets, the same thing. Because R&D is intangible assets, and this is the same trend. So in the first beginning, firm was young, and then spend much more R&D expenditure and have higher intangible assets. But over time, this trend decayed. They are using this equation, regressing for the age. So this is the results. So why young firms want classified board? So they have some reason, right? Yeah, protect innovation. And they want to protect their innovation, and because they have information asymmetry for the R&D expenditure or innovation product, and so protect those from short-term market pressure. So this could allow managers to focus on long-term value, creating value for the firm without fear of a hostile takeover during the early stage. By contrast, mature firms tend to be declassified. So the reason are very clear too. No longer need this because it probably will lead to managerial entrustment or higher agency cost. Okay. So table 1 showing the result very clear and straightforward. We can take a look at the age because this is a life cycle story of the focus, right? So here you can see classified board, young or mature. Classified board, on average the age is 13 compared to unitarian, 16 age. So it's older, it's younger. And classified board is younger on their market to book value is larger, right? is larger and the value is higher and compared to classified board when they get mature. And we can take a look at the institutional investor, passive institutional investor. Actually, classified board have a higher institutional investor. When you get in mature, it's very hard to get in, right? So you cannot take over so easy. And as for the S&P 1,500, these two samples does not have a significant difference. So that's a good one because we have a very equal size for staggered or non-staggered board. The same, very similar observations. Not a big one or a relative to small one. You can see that the S&P 1,500, they have the very similar ratios. And if we take a look at the age, life cycle, first of all, let's take a look at the full sample. We can see younger firms and older firms. Younger firms positively use classified board, right? So it's positive. In older firms, usually less likely to use classified board. For sample, over 3 decades, 30 years. But take a look at the older firm. Older firms, you can see most recent decade does not use classified board in these 2 decades. In IPO cohort, the same result. Older firms does not use classified board, negative, does not use. But interesting, IPO cohort here, we can see in 1990, very early stage, no matter you're young or mature, on that era, that decade, we can see even for getting older, they still prefer using staggered board because 1990s, that's a story for anti-takeover. So maybe this can connect it anti-takeover story because in that case, anti-takeover is very popular. So no matter you're young or old, always use staggered board. So this is related to the era and the decade story. And sometimes it related to life cycle story, depending on what you focus on. But this paper, because of the horizontal on the longitudinal, so very large sample, we can test a lot of story. Here is interesting. In these 2 decades, I circle with green. Even younger firms, 2 to 3 age, don't use classified board. Young age start to not use staggered board too. Before younger firms, you can see, right? Positive, positive, positive. But revolution changed the story. This decade, younger age, no longer use classified board. So this is a very strong patterns across the large sample and the lengthening data, including small, medium, large, public, or intransparent. So the conclusion should be very convincing. And here is institutional investors. And the authors are using CS to represent different proxy. So in these columns, CS means big three, institutional investor. And in that panel, it represents not a quasi institutional ownership. Here we can see, I always say, look at the most recent, closer to us. That's the main story. We understand the story, present time, and then we can look further to the prior story. So here we can see getting older, getting older, getting older. This is 15 years. In these 15 years, we can see firms with higher or with big three IO. Firm with big three IO in these 15 years less likely to adapt staggered board negatively, right? So in these 15 years, it interacted with big three. So in these 15 years, firm with big three included on board, less likely to use staggered board. The same story with this, less likely to use staggered board. But earlier stage, 15 years, the story is the opposite. When firm getting older, now older firm in these 15 years with big three IO less likely to adapt staggered board, the same story. So older firms don't like, especially 15 years reason, and those with big three. But early stage, even you are older firms, early stage, they use staggered boards. So very interesting. That means early stage, actually they have the other story. Using staggered board can have protection for innovation, protection for takeover, or protection for information asymmetry, and many other strategies, which is different from most recent. So older firms in early stage, they still use staggered board. So the paper have one conclusion, means the results are generally applied, but not always equal, right? Depending on whether we conclude the institutional ownership. So the same way we can see that the early stage, older firms still adapt, and most likely to adapt staggered board. But we can understand most recent story, we don't use staggered board. No longer needed. But we have to trace back to the earlier stage story they are using, they're actually using. So they have a reversal. The reversal may come from, you present that may come from like performances or Tobin skew or market to book value, because everyone wants the stock price goes up. If something hinders the stock price, it will change the corporate structure from the board. So from that table, we can see the usually results. Okay, so mature and going public, high pressure to classify, because just demanding annual election to increase the managerial accountability and remove those governance penalties significantly. You are underperform, you will be replaced very quick. We don't need to wait. We have to replace all the board entirely. So takeover is very competitive. Okay, you have to just do your best every year. Okay, so I have a curiosity about your idea. Can you guys answer the question here? Now you have a different view. So I have curiosity, which view are you keeping in mind? Let me know. If you are an institutional investor, you see a 20 years old profitable manufacturer firm still use classified board. What's your instance and reaction for this? Because it's just different from the pattern. So what's your idea about this? You are adapting life cycle or adapting protection, or you are adapting entrenchment. All could be possible because this paper all could happen, right? Early stage, most recent decade, or in the middle, depending on different factors. I have curiosity. So you say, I need to see their R&D spend first. So it means what? If R&D spend larger, I still need to keep the stagger. That means what? Is that correct? If R&D is high, still keep stagger, which is correct. Okay, so probably life cycle views, you agree with the life cycle views. So check whether we need stagger, because the paper doesn't say decline the stagger all the time. It depending on the situation. Okay, very good. And then take a look at the reality in practice. Actually, Apple, now Amazon, Google, NVIDIA, all use declassifying. So replace the board director entirely in a given year. So you have to keep working because very competitive. You might be changed, might be switched, might be replaced. Only Tesla, historical, is a staggered because you know Elon Musk have 24% of ownership, right? So historically, this is staggered, used to protect the high-risk R&D expenditure and the founder vision. Okay, it's very difficult to replace the board director entirely because the founder, Elon Musk, the vision never change from the market pressure. So this is a special case. Maybe next time you introduce Intel and Tesla can compare together. And table 4, the paper using whether the firm belonged to S&P 1,500 or market value equity. Here we can see older firm. Let's take a look at this. Older firm, when they belong to the index, is S&P 1,500, less likely to adapt a staggered. Older firm in this sample, S&P, less likely. in this decade. Don't use this. The same thing, we can check this one. Older firms, right? In this decade, older firm with high market book value, market to book value, performance, maybe. Okay, so older firm with high market to book value in this decade, less likely to use staggered. Okay, so it's the same patterns. Older firm in S&P and in market to book equity, less likely to use staggered. So they are using interaction. Interaction is the firm size, market to book equity. Okay, that's the firm size. So larger firm, older firm, less likely to use staggered in this decade. And S&P, the same patterns, less likely to use them. And this is a large sample. And coefficient and R square is quite high. So there have some results. Okay, mature S&P firms less likely to keep classified or staggered after 2010. And larger mature firms move away from staggered too. Okay, so the same results we compare along with that table. Finally, table 5. Because we have to match the result using staggered or non-staggered, create value for the shareholders. Everyone will ask, did you create value or destroy value? Here is the result. IPO firms, age 0, always use staggered because at that time, it creates value. IPO firm, when you are age 0, create value using staggered board. But from age 2, getting a little older, age 2 to more than 10 years, age 2 to more than 10 years, and the others, samples different decades, we can see the same result. Using staggered board, destroy value because it's negatively, significantly affect the Tobin skew. So this is quite important because if you're using staggered board, destroy value, why you have to? Only one exception is a strategy consideration because you have to protect something or you have a strategic logic or otherwise using staggered board, destroy value from age 2 to most recent. So this is a very convincing result to let your shareholder know why we have to switch to unitary board because your stock price or your Tobin skew fair value may be destroying based on your board structure. So this is the main finding from table 5. We can see different decades may have different story, and there have some reversal point. Positive turned out to be negative on different decade. So here you can see, most recent you can see that it's not significant. We don't count this, right? Yeah. Whether they affect the Tobin skew in 90s decades. Overall, it's yes, but it's actually dominated by this period rather than by this decade. This decade, they have a diversity in impact factors, inferences, Tobin skew, not just staggered board. So only panel D does not significant. Other than that, they're very significant. Using staggered board actually destroy value significantly. Only when firm in the IPO age 0, using staggered board create a lot of values. You can see the coefficient is much larger than the others. So here is the main story of the paper. And finally, I want to address some disadvantage or critics or comments. I think you guys already mentioned a little and very similar. Causality in this paper is still limited, okay, because it's not the main story. Okay, they are not using like a difference in differences or causality, endogeneity. They don't do that. Okay, they are providing the main story, which is a life cycle story, and activism story with the staggered board or non-staggered board, whether they create value or why the evolution comes to here. And there have measurement errors may contain some noise. Everyone knows that using machine learning to train models is very, very, I can say if you are professional AI or professional AI expertise, maybe more accurate. But if your turn, like 25 turns, you pick the wrong turns to category the stacker board type, it may contain some noise. So depending on your machine learning expertise level and the text analysis, whether you pick the very correct text analysis and whether you manually check is enough. So this could be a different answers. So it contains some potential misclassification risk still. So there may have some noise. But you know, this paper we focus on the bright side rather than the dark side because no one will do that. It's too hard for the edge 30 years, IPO included, and so many firms listed. And another question or comment is the value test are reduced firms. Here is another one. So some results showing it create value and the others not, and depending on the life cycle stage. And actually we can do this further. Okay, so this is not the very standardized check because endogeneity and very and many variables, fixed effect and individuals financial statement control without in the model. Okay, so could be enhanced if you are interested in further research. But basically, this paper make a strong data contribution. Only some weak in identification, measurement, and interpretation still can be sharpening if you are interested in this topic. So this paper, I hope that you guys learn something about the board structure. One day, MBA will go to like CEOs, board directors, doing something expertise. One day, you will sit on the board and you will know a staggered board or non-staggered board expertise, your professional skill, and all your education level and all your presentation skill, and you will apply all this knowledge to your company. One day, you will have that day coming soon, very quick. Okay, I hope you learned something from the paper. Any other questions? No questions? Okay. Then our class ends here, and thank you everyone for participating in the discussion. You guys did a very good job. Well, I will see you next week.